What's up, YouTube? Here's another one. Of course, as many of you know, over the past week or so, I've just been sharing some things that have been on my mind as I've gone through my own deconstruction and deconversion process. I officially became an atheist about 10 years ago, but I've kind of just lived with these thoughts, not really sharing with anybody else. So today I want to share my problems with the church. What's wrong with the church. The information I've shared over the past few weeks is not controversial by any stretch of the imagination. I've gone to great lengths to not actually attack religion or not attack anybody's belief, but simply to share those things that I've thought about, those things that have been on my mind. It's almost a form of therapy. But the information I've shared, it's not a secret and it's not buried history. The information didn't recently become available, and it's not stemming from any new wave of thought. A lot of the questions and concerns that I've shared, many have shared over the years, over the decades. The only major difference between recent times and times before is that Christians no longer have the indiscriminate right to kill people who question their faith. That is mostly the main difference. And that in itself is a recent phenomenon. You know, as recent as 400, 500 years ago, Christians could attack people and kill people who did not accept their faith in the same way that some religions still do today. Now, Christians still do advocate for the imprisonment of others who do not share their beliefs. And of course, they'll say, well, no, we don't advocate for the imprisonment of someone who doesn't believe that Jesus is Lord, but you would advocate for the imprisonment of someone who smokes marijuana or cannabis. But anyway, that's not the point. My problem is with the disingenuousness of the practitioners. Primarily the ones who've come into my comments to expose their hell and sin fetishes. It's really quite disturbing when you take a look through some of them. And I encourage you all to do so. Scroll through those comments and see what you find. But I kind of consider much of this very disingenuous. There are two scriptures that I'd like to use if I can, if I have your permission. One of them is to study to show yourself approved, right? That's one of those, I think that's good advice, right? Even as an atheist, I think studying to show yourself approved is a good advice. I wish more believers would live by that, or at least add that to their workflow, to their processing. And then another one is, in all thy getting, get understanding, which means in everything that you're getting, try to really get an understanding. Now, my relationship with Christianity, my relationship with church, that's what it was about. It was about studying to show myself approved, and in all of my getting, doing my best to get understanding. And it's because of that, and you can check out some of the videos that I've done with other people kind of explaining my story. It's really because of that helped me deconstruct even more, because I did not find a lot of believers doing the same thing. What I found are people, including pastors, who have barely even read the Bible. And for some of the ones who have, again, they didn't read it to study it. They just pick out their favorite verses. Oh, this makes me feel good. So it's very much like an emotional relationship, like with a love letter or something. Many of them even call it that. Now, to read something like that and call it a love letter, yikes. But anyway, okay. So the problem is that most of them have not gone as far as to study the authorship of the various writings. So a lot of what preachers say is assumptive and has not been based on any study or any continuity of thought. They've not gone as far as to familiarize themselves with the canonization process of Scripture, which you would think would be foundational. Now, if I'm going to preach this, or forget preaching it, if I'm going to stake my eternal soul on this, surely I want to check and see how this thing came into existence. I want to know the people who put it together. I want to know their motivations. I want to know their intent. I want to know what they thought would happen or what they hoped would happen. But honestly, and I was in this for 20 years, I didn't find many. Now, that's not saying that there aren't any, but the fact that there aren't many should be alarming. It was to me. Many of them have not acclimated themselves with the historicity of the variety of cultures represented within the text. There's so many cultures represented. In the Old Testament alone, you can just start with the Canaanite culture. I'll leave that there because that's a whole nother other video. But yes, the problem is that they haven't studied the authorship. They're not familiar with the historicity. They haven't acclimated themselves to the canonization process. So how can you say you've studied? Right? Sure, you can say you believed. That's fine. I will make no arguments there. I'm not here to debate. I'm just sharing what I think. I'm sharing my perspectives. If you don't like it, drop it in the comments. And I'm just going to thank you for your support that way. But how can you say you've studied if you're not familiar with the authors? If you're not familiar with the anonymity of many of the authors, if you're not familiar with the canonization process, if you don't even understand the cultures that existed around the turn of the century, how can you say you studied? And if your relationship with the Bible can't rightfully be described as studious, how can you, in good faith, defend it in your attacks and harmful beliefs against others? It's one thing to hold a belief, a sincerely held belief, simply because you believe it. That's fine. Just be honest and say that. Say, I don't have any reason to believe this. No, I have not did the research on this, but my grandma said this, or my big ma, or my Uncle Jojo, they told me to believe this, and so I believe this. That's fine. You have that right. But then to take something that you believe without evidence, take something that you believe and you didn't even believe it enough to study it, to take something that you believe and you don't even believe it enough to be faithful in it, but to take something that you believe and you've not done any due diligence, but you feel absolutely okay to try to attack other people's because they are not that irresponsible with their belief system, that kind of makes you disingenuous. How can you take your lack of study and try to force it on other people? How can you take your lack of study and get in the pulpit and preach it as unadulterated truth? And I know many preachers who do this. How can you take your lack of study and pass it down to your children, threatening them, shaming them, guilting them with hell and condemnation from a book that you haven't even attempted to get an understanding of? That's disingenuous. 100% of the Christians I've met fall into this category. They fall into the category of people who have not wrestled with what they worshiped enough to be familiar with the facts. Which I'm not saying have to change their faith. I'm not saying that if you do wrestle with what you worship, you're going to end up like me. I don't care who becomes like me. My goal here is that if you're going to try to push something on other people, if you're going to treat other people differently because they do not share your delusions, then the very least you can do is actually be studious about the beliefs you claim to have. It says something if we have people in the pulpits and in the pews who are all pretending to have studied in a way that the glaring majority of them have not. It's just a little disingenuous to me. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you.